what's up, everybody? My name is John Bautista, and you are listening to the Marriage Savvy Podcast. On today's show, we're going to continue our coaching series of I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Like, guys, that really does happen. And so I'm excited today. We're going to be jumping in on Kim and John's story, and we're going to pick up where we left off. In this episode, we're going to see how Kim and John finally realize that they need to change. Is anybody else curious on how they're going to make the shift? They're going to make the change? We're going to play the clip. We're going to bring back Amanda Richardson, our director of coaching at the Marriage Place. We're going to process, and I hope that you guys get a chance to take away something from today's show. Coming up on today's show. The Marriage Savvy Podcast is for informational purposes only. It should not be used to diagnose, treat, or act as medical advice. Always seek the advice of your primary care physician, mental health professional, or qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition and/or mental illness.
So I want to talk about making repair and what. So I grew up in a house where I don't really remember ever making repair. If things blew up or if things you got a fight or whatever, it was a blow up, and then it was like you just ignored that it ever happened. You said, maybe you said I'm sorry, maybe not, but at the end of the day, people went off to their corners and then would come back and act like nothing had happened. That's my memory of my childhood. When I talk about doing nice things, and Kim felt like that was manipulation, to me, that was
repair.
That was the way you make repair. After something happens, you don't admit what you did. You don't talk about what you did. You just go forward and try to be as nice to the person as you possibly can be. And so to me, that looked like repair.
Well, a lot of people don't know how to make repair, right? That's modeled in a lot of families, and people that say they're sorry and you have to squeeze it out of them. Like, I said, I'm sorry. What more do you want from me? Kind of thing. And they think they've made repair. That's not repair.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's more dismissive, right? Completely of the other person's feelings.
More distance, more whatever. Yeah. And so we just had a lot that we had to figure out was going on for each of us. And there was a lot of skills that had to learn and forgiveness that had to happen. It was a long road back. So I hear clients say that a lot. I love my partner. I want a divorce. He's a nice guy, or she's a good person, but I'm not in love with them. And I know where they're coming from, because that's exactly how I felt. I still was married to this really amazing person who had so much integrity and was so respectable in so many ways. There's so much I always adored about John. But years of navigating through these hard times without the skills to do it well, and the rupture in trust that was never being properly repaired. It's very common when you start to feel unsafe emotionally in a relationship, or unheard or unseen, that the passion dies. So you still feel love, you still feel connection and friendship to some degree, but you shut that part of you off. And that's why you often feel like you're not in love with your partner anymore. And so when that goes away, it can feel so hopeless and feel like you'll never get that back. It really scared me. I remember thinking, he's such a nice guy. I really like him. I love him. I just don't want to be married to him anymore. I don't feel romantic toward him anymore. I don't feel safe around him anymore. And I also I didn't like who I was showing up in this relationship either. Like, I wanted to run from that person of who I was when things were bad. And so what can be so disheartening and feel so hopeless is you feel like you'll never get that back. How do you get that back? And that's why we started the marriage place. And that's why we're telling this story now, because we've lived it and we know that you absolutely can come back richer and sweeter than it ever was.
And I think it's also
That's
important to note that our society, especially Hollywood, tells you that the feeling of I'm in love is permanent, and it's not. Everybody, even now, we go through periods of time where um, we're not feeling all the lovey-dovey. We're not just in it. It's not just there. I mean, you struggle, and it will come back as long as you know, as long as you're trying. I mean, you still love the person, and so we are people, and we fail, and we do things that um, aren't the best, but we're not going to feel one way all of the time, and that doesn't mean that you don't love the person anymore.
No, but you have to act lovingly even when you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
Or you create damage that's really hard to come back from.
Yeah.
the concept of you have to do something, you have to notice, you have to own your part, and building the intimacy back, building the trust back takes effort, takes intention, takes work. That's where the connecting strategies come in. And you guys, it sounds like, fumbled through it to figure it out over 35 years. With our clients, we come alongside them to teach them in session how to learn to connect, identify the disconnecting strategies, identify your part, do the repair, and practice connection. And that's how you build back the intimacy and the trust. It sounds super simple. It's not. It
No,
is a process.
when you're in it, you're doing the very things that cause the problem, but you think you're doing something to make it better.
Mhm.
And so many times people are, I mean, if you look at, here is what, this particular attachment type is looking for, and this is what this particular attachment type gives. If you put those together, they're a perfect storm. And that's a lot of what happened with us. Is my way of dealing with things and trying to, what I felt like was making repair was just driving her farther away. It looked so different to her than what I was intending.
How did you figure out how to connect, how to come back to the understanding and the cherishing?
It's not easy. And if you don't have that level of commitment, if you say, well, I'm not feeling it today, so let's just give up on it, you're not going to survive. And so I think the first step for us in figuring it out was saying, I made this commitment. I made this covenant. I said I would do this. So I've got to figure out a way to make it work. That was the first step.
I think for me, it was my faith in God that I was in so much pain and so miserable for so long. And I started praying that God would show me my part in this and how to get out of this, how to get out of this pain. And yeah, be ready for that. Be ready for that prayer, because he did. And I had a lot of my own stuff in this. And it took me a long time to work through that. My own, I had struggled with depression and anxiety for most of my life. I didn't have a good handle on that. My own self-esteem and worth that I had to heal and deal with so that I could hear John when he wanted to show up and he wanted to tell me things he didn't like about me or what he was seeing in me. I could hold that and not go into toxic shame and not feel depressed and abandoned and hurt. And, I could hear that. So that was a lot of my own self-healing that came from that. I had to learn that it was never okay to to rage at him or to be angry and hurt him in that way. That's never okay, no matter how justified I felt or how much pain I felt like he had inflicted on me. It was my job to grow up and regulate my emotions in this relationship. I had to learn that.
You're responsible for the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and a whole lot of work on forgiveness and rebuilding trust and forgiving myself too. But this belief that when you create a family, when you create a family through commitment and promises, and you share finances and DNA, and you create children, and you know, when you build this thing, it is not to be taken lightly, and there is a huge responsibility on us to grow ourselves up and manage that well. And I owed that to my children, and I owed it to him, and I owed it to me. And um, that's the word. That's why marriage can't be easy. It shouldn't be easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so people come, and it's all love and flowers and good feelings, and they think, this is amazing. This person's going to be my person the rest of my life. And then it gets hard, and it's like, marriage shouldn't be hard. How many times have you heard that? Marriage shouldn't be this hard. I'm like, why not?
Or people often will come and say, I just want to be happy. My marriage doesn't make me happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what does make you happy 100% of the time? I don't know of anything that does.
Right.
Yeah.
Going back, when I would feel um, that I was not behaving the way that I wanted to behave, and not doing the things I wanted to do, I would often tell myself, "But you're a nice guy. You know, you got all these good traits that balance all this stuff out. You're a nice guy." So I would let myself off the hook. And at some point, we were actually in therapy, and this is the probably the only time we really had a really good therapist. And I found out that being the nice guy wasn't really being nice. I wasn't showing up. I viewed a lot of, well, whatever she wants, whatever, however, I'll do whatever I can to help her out. I'll do whatever. I was being the nice guy, but I wasn't showing up as a presence. And that wasn't being nice. That was
It
actually,
wasn't actually connecting. It was fake. It was a mask you were wearing. Nice guy mask, not actually genuine John.
yeah.
Well, the therapist was saying, this really shook him. I remember this. She said, you're working for your own comfort. You think you're keeping the peace but really that's just for you. It's a very selfish goal, is to try to keep the peace in relationships with people.
So in this episode, we were looking back on those hard conversations and the conflict and the disconnect, and we moved towards Kim and John sharing how they eventually, it wasn't quick, right, over time. In fact, lots of years for them. They didn't have the counseling and the coaching that
That's right.
our clients have today, and so their
Right.
process was a lot longer, but they started to soften towards each other. That connection started growing as they shared. They started owning their parts a little bit more. John
Yeah.
shared that he dug into his faith.
I mean, just off the bat, I mean, they kind of said that there were already some issues that were happening, that were occurring in and like around them, and what they grew up in, that kind of hindered this idea of even, trying to repair or trying to seek connection in a healthy way. And one of those things I thought was really important was that they just said, "Man, we just don't know how. Like, we just didn't know how. We didn't know what we were fighting."
Right,
Right?
right.
Like they said, "I don't know what I grew up with enough to realize that it was not helpful in my own relationship."
They were repeating what they had learned, and that's what most of us do, right? We
Right.
learn unhealthy ways
Right.
of getting our needs met.
Right.
The difference, and when we start to really experience change in our relationships, is when we learn how to have healthy connection, which is
Yeah.
where John and Kim really started to notice the change in
Mhm.
their relationship.
Additionally, like John also said that Hollywood played an important role. He said that all the stories, they seemed like love was some type of permanent feeling, and so whenever the feeling left,
Mhm.
which I don't know how soon it was after they got married, but whenever the feeling of love left,
Mhm.
that kind of shook them. Like, oh my gosh, like why isn't it there anymore? Why isn't the passion there anymore? Whenever situations were coming up.
Right. When all of those disconnecting strategies were happening, they were trying to get these needs met, and instead they were experiencing hurt and
Yeah.
pain. And it is confusing.
Yeah, and just to like normalize it, as we say, is that a lot of the things that we believe, sometimes we got to question, hey, is that something that is reasonable? Is that something that is actually happening in life? Like, you know, um, John said something really important. He said, "Is there anything that's ever going to fulfill you 1,000% about a human being?" He's like, no, because we're all broken. Like we're all people that have, mess ups and frailties and flaws and weaknesses.
Right. Right. So, what are we looking for in our relationships? Are we looking for someone to make us happy? Yeah, we're going to be disappointed then.
And then Kim said something really interesting. She said, acting lovingly or not being able to act lovingly whenever we don't feel it. And I think that a lot of people, uh, some of the couples that I have been in session with, saying, I will treat him in a good way once I get treated in a good way.
Mm,
It's kind of
yes.
like, I'll do it if he does it, or I'll do it if she does it.
Right? Kind of like kids on a playground, right? It's a very immature way. That's the child in us,
Yeah,
right? That's
yeah,
that's wanting to
yeah.
to get this need met, but not that loving response.
Right, right. It's
Mhm.
it's guys, it's the little Nino in us. And I
Yes.
know that the little Nino is there. But we gotta tell the Nino the adult is in charge. At
Yes.
least that's what I tell myself, all right? Something that they both said was owning our part, right?
Mhm.
John would go off in his car and he'd pray and be like, man, God, what do I do here? And then Kim would do the same thing. And then they both started saying, and then I realized what was going on with me, and then that's when something clicked for them,
Right. They
right?
realize their contribution to the dysfunction. That is the
Yes.
big aha moment when the
Yeah.
relationship started to change.
Yeah. John said something, and I want you to speak about this. I know that you've been working with marriages for 10 plus years, maybe 15 plus years, but he said that marriage requires a level of commitment that people don't expect. And he said, I realized that when I said I do, it means that now I have to do. What do
Mhm.
you think about that?
Yeah, I think he's right. Our society has this kind of culture of that throwaway marriage that it's not forever. If it gets hard or uncomfortable, well then I'll just move on to another one. But as John's expressing, that is not his belief. His belief is I committed to this for better or worse. It's a covenant. And I'm going to do my part to make it better by looking at how I'm contributing to the worse.
Yeah. And
That
he
made it.
said in this episode that he gave space. He started to give space, right? In the past, he would do things to, like, what you call it, placate, or to appease, or to in some way like manipulate the situation to be on her softer side, like on her good side. But really, he needed to figure out, I made a commitment, so I need to put in the effort.
Mhm.
One, and then I have to realize that the ways that I'm doing this is not helping. It's not helping us.
Right. He
Um,
saw that those disconnecting strategies
that's
that
right.
he was using were pushing Kim further away. And what Kim was saying was, I need space. I don't
Yeah,
want to be pursued right now. Every time he pleased and pursued, it was dismissive of how she was feeling. When he
yeah,
stopped, all of a sudden she felt a little bit more seen, a little
yeah,
bit more understood. And that's where the connection could start to grow.
yeah. It gave them time to focus on each other,
Yes.
like on themselves for the sake of each other. Um, One thing that Kim said I thought was really insightful. She said, "I had to learn what was going on with myself and do the work in me, so that I could hold what John had to say whenever he needed to say, and
Yes.
that I would not go into toxic shame. In our field of study, we we talk about that as being differentiation, and I think
Mhm.
a lot of people may not know the impact that differentiation, knowing what that is, and knowing how to work or cultivate that can do for us. Can you explain to our audience what differentiation means?
Yes. So, differentiation is a really hard concept to understand, especially if you weren't really taught it in your childhood. If you grew up believing that you could make mom or dad mad, and that if they were sad, then you needed to be sad, and you became sort of enmeshed in their emotions, versus a healthy differentiation is to know, you know, my spouse can be really disappointed and frustrated, and I don't take that on. That's their feelings. My job is to understand, to be curious, but not to take it on or take it personally. That is a really healthy way of differentiating. The problem is there's a lot going on inside of us when we experience other people's emotions and even our
Yeah,
own
yeah,
emotions and
yeah.
thoughts.
Especially if those emotions in our partner are specifically uh, a result of our impact with our words or behavior, right? So, like, we're not saying that we make people feel some kind of way, like some
Right.
type of voodoo stuff, like anger, right? And
Yes.
you just throw it on somebody like a sneeze.
Right.
No, 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 nothing like that. But it is true that what we do, like everything that we do, is kind of communal. Like we impact things and people
That's
and
right.
places by what we do in relationship to them. And
Mhm.
what you're saying with differentiation is that it's understanding your perspective, your opinion, how you feel, um, and knowing what you want and what you don't want, and that being okay with that being different than someone else
Yes.
in their own experiences.
You explained it really well.
That,
Yes.
no, you're
Yes.
good. I mean, I'm just summing up what you just said. And so, um, when Kim says I had to learn how to hold what John had to say to me, she's really encouraging, listeners as she's sharing that vulnerability, because that's huge. I mean, to
Yeah.
share, so that I would not go into toxic shame,
Hmm.
right? Is that she learned how to be okay with somebody maybe disagreeing or not enjoying their experience of her.
Right. It,
Man, that's
it's huge, and that
yeah.
the is a connecting strategy, to be able to hear someone, to
Mhm.
listen and calm everything that's going on inside of you, the taking it personally, the anxiety, the fear, the anger,
Right.
and to just get curious about, I wonder what their experience is.
Mm.
That's really hard work, and we spend a lot of time in session learning how to do that. It takes a lot of awareness and slowing down, and it's something that Kim and John, they shared, they still work on that even
That's right.
today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the work never really stops. We get better at
Right.
doing the work.
We're building muscles is
That's
how I like to describe
that's right. I like that. That's very teacher esque.
it.
We're building muscles.
Uh-huh.
Trainer, right? Coach. There
Yes,
you go.
yes, working it out.
Yeah, working it out. Um, at the very end of that, she said, I learned once I was able to hold what he had to say, I learned that it's not okay to rage, and
Mhm.
in my rage hurt him.
Yes.
And that was huge. That was
Right.
huge for her. That was huge for both of them, because at this point, John realized, hey, she's trying to hold space for me. So
Mhm.
now I don't have to hide or shrink or appease. I can finally say what I would like to say.
Yes, from an authentic place, not out of anxiety.
Ooh,
Yes.
there you go.
They began to have a real relationship versus this constant pretending and hiding and withdrawing,
That's right.
anxiety driven relationship.
Yeah.
Mhm.
a lot of people, I mean, like even myself, when I look about past relationships, I mean, there's been times to where it's been anxiety driven, and whether it's me in my contribution or my partner that had the contribution, it just, man, it sucks. It sucks being in an anxiety driven relationship, especially when partners are not open and honest.
Yes, it leaves one or both of you feeling unknown, unseen, unsafe, disconnected.
That's right.
The opposite of what we're hoping for.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, Amanda, tell the audience, what is one thing that they can do aside from looking at the connecting strategies? Like, what is something
Mhm.
that you would recommend somebody to cultivate the awareness, um, so that they can take on their own responsibility of what's going on?
I would encourage anybody that is wanting to grow individually and in relationship to spend some time turning inward, reflecting on their internal world. What are the stories you're telling yourself? What are you feeling? What is happening? What is real? Where are you focusing your energy? Are you constantly ruminating about the past and the future? If that's the case, then you're not going to be connected to right here, right now, where connection is possible. So, slowing down, really getting to know what's going on inside of you, so then you can choose to get curious and connect to those that you love.
With that, I would also encourage, ask your friends, ask the people that are closest to you. Hey, do I do this? Do I become defensive whenever? Am I defensive? Am I a defensive person? Can you give me some feedback? I mean, those questions. Listen, y'all, like you'd have to be ready for the answer.
It will help you build those muscles, right?
But yeah, it will
As you
help you build.
experience the discomfort
That's right.
inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mamba mentality. No, I'm just kidding. Shout out Kobe Bryant. Well, cool. Well, thanks, Amanda, for this episode. I mean, I really appreciate your time and for jumping on and giving us some more things to consider as we navigate Kim and John's story. But also, this is helping us. So thank you.
Thank you, John.